Core Stories, Ordinary Marines, Extraordinary Lives.
Hey everybody, Happy New Year. So glad that we have turned the page. Anyway, we have a spectacular interview for you this time. Valerie Jackson is the director of the Krulak Center for Creativity and Innovation at the Marine Corps University there at Quantico. And she is in a civilian capacity there, but she is a reservist Marine Corps colonel, of course, having been on active duty plenty times in the past. Anyway, she gave me a wonderful interview, and I had been so curious about the Krulak Center. And so I went to an open house there, and it was fascinating. I really recommend that if you're nearby, you try to get up there on one of their open houses. Please enjoy this interview, and I'll catch you on the backside. Colonel Valerie Jackson, it is a delight to be with you today for Core Stories Innovators. And I have to tell you that I've really been looking forward to this. And I'm so glad that you are our first podcast of the year, because 2021 is turning a page in so many ways. But I have been very curious about the Krulak Center. I have been very interested and curious about the Krulak Center. And I went to one of your open houses because I drove a couple hundred miles, it seems to, well, from Portsmouth, it's about 150 miles, up because I really wanted to know. And that day, you were doing a fascinating little, I guess you had a vendor come in to do display, do a presentation on a product. And I wonder first, just if you could tell us about that, and then we'll dive into sort of what the Krulak Center, what everybody in the Marine Corps needs to know about the Krulak Center.
Okay, great. Yeah, so thanks for having me on. This is an honor for me. I really enjoy these types of things and getting to talk about the Krulak Center story and the amazing team that I have and all that we're able to do, and then share that with all your listeners. So this is exciting for me as well. That day during the open house, the open house is a new concept for us, born out of COVID, like many of our things this past year. Normally, we have a lot of foot traffic, people coming in and out, and we also have in the spring semester an innovation summit where we would have many vendors come. It's a university-wide endeavor, and many vendors would come, and students would have the ability to wander through and see sort of what's cutting edge in the defense sector. That day, that was a company based out of Alexandria that has done some work with DoD on virtual reality, augmented reality, suits and gear and headsets for not only just defense or national security type minded people, but for also everyday citizens. They demoed to us how you could, through the use of augmented reality goggles, condense a 30-day training program for firefighters. And you hear a siren out my window. 30-day firefighter training program into 30 minutes. So wow. And so what excited us about that particular thing was the ability to affect training inside the Marine Corps. Because we have these months-long schools that every Marine has to go through depending what their job is. And we thought, well, what if through the use of augmented reality, could you rapidly condense or dramatically condense that training time, which gives us a more capable Marine faster? And that's not necessarily in our wheelhouse, but it's an example of one of the things that we do for the Corps, for the Joint Force, where we sort of bring in these people and organizations and stimulate a conversation or connect people. And what we did with our higher headquarters at Training and Education Command, where the training resides for the Marine Corps. That's, again, we're on the education side, so that was a more applicable skill set for them to know or be aware of. But anyway, that's what we were doing that day in the Krulak Center. Krulak Center itself, though, is only about 2.5 years old in its current format. I came on board in July of 2018 to be its first full-time deputy, government employee or director, I'm sorry. Previous to that, it had existed with just a couple of people sort of in a side office that were trying to figure out how this idea of getting creativity and innovation inculcated into the PME programs across Marine Corps University, how that could be invigorated, if you will, because it all came out of student surveys as the university does its retrospective quality enhancement programming requirements for accreditation, all that sort of thing. And students were surveyed and they said, hey, we want the ability to come to PME and to learn how to be more creative and innovative. And so the university took that feedback and said, well, let's create this center. And there were a couple of tries at how they thought they could do that with, of course, limited resources like we always have. And then our last commanding general essentially came up with the idea of taking these disassociated University Foundation Donald Bren chairs, all academic SMEs in their own right, and then combining that into the Krulak Center with a handful of military staff to sort of get this thing up off the ground. And then they brought me in to be the director. And so that's how we came to be. And we've been sort of, we like to say, building the plane as we're flying it ever since, because the plane keeps changing. We had it built pretty well the first year, but then with COVID, things continue to change. So.
Well, the name, I think, is very interesting. So there's a couple of things that kind of drag me to it. One is that it's named the Krulak Center, which of course is interesting to me because General Krulak was in my book, The Great Marines of Virginia, because he actually was born, I guess, at Quantico. And when a Marine is born at Quantico, you understand that he's been born there because his father was serving there. And I didn't know if he wanted to claim Virginia as his home state. So I wrote him and I said, do you want me to include you in the Virginia book, which was the first book and the only one I ever published, although I did the research for all 50 states. And he said, absolutely, Virginia is my home. So that was one thing. And the other thing, of course, was the innovation, creativity and innovation, which is very important, I think, in this world as we move forward in the age of technology. Innovation becomes a much more individual-based. Large organizations do not have the authority over innovation that they once had. The average person can come up with an innovative idea that can affect an industry in a year. Mm-hmm. And so I knew that the Marine Corps was embracing having Marines come up with ideas and seeing about that. And then this Krulak Center. But what I really wanted to ask you was to explain for our audience. And I had written you this, and it's a departure from the way I normally conduct these interviews, which is normally, how did we get here? Where is here for the innovator, and where are we going? But for the Krulak Center, I felt like that the Krulak Center is doing such intense, complicated things that many of us in sort of the periphery Marine Corps community don't really understand it. And so I knew that when I met you that day at the open house, that you were very open to talking about the Krulak Center with civilians, with people in the Marine Corps community who were not necessarily in the university community, but who appreciate the university community, and sort of explain it for us, break it down into ways. So I asked you to think about sort of 5 things that every Marine might want to know about the Krulak Center, and you happily agreed, and I'm so grateful.
No, I'm so glad you asked. And you said 5 things. I would probably say more than 5 things because I don't want to limit myself or the audience that might not know what it is we're doing. But first, a couple of things. Well, the Krulak Center is actually the Brute Krulak Center for Innovation and Creativity. Of course, Brute Krulak was General Commandant Krulak's father, a great innovator for our Corps, and talk about his work with the Higgins boat in World War II and all of that, and the amphibious tractor and how that allowed us to speed to victory during World War II, and then his many other innovations throughout his career. So he's our inspiration. Commandant Krulak is very much involved in what we do, and in very key points He is definitely a confidant for me, someone that I will reach out to, and he certainly ensures that we're resourced and on the straight and narrow and doing things that keep the Krulak Center name in the point and place of pride where it should be.
I was going to miss an opportunity to talk about my book and General.
Not at all, but I just wanted to make it known to the audience.
Of course.
Yeah, some people might wonder, and he is involved to the extent that he can be, and he's very aware of what we're doing, and he's a huge number one fan, if you will.
I love it.
What made the start of the center so great for me, and I think a lot of Marines feel this way, and I am in this position, I am a civilian director, but of course I'm a colonel in the reserves, and so it's hard in a military setting to disassociate the two sometimes. My staff does a pretty good job, but sometimes it's difficult for those on the outside. So anyway, in the setting of the university, when my first meeting with General Bowers, who was the president, he said, essentially, here's what you have. These are the people. Get this thing up and running. And essentially, he's like, I got to go. I have a meeting. So for that's a Marine's dream, right? Like, hey, here are your limits, very loosely, go and get it done. And so we were very small at that point. In fact, our original, my right hand, my deputy at that point, he is retired from the Marine Corps. And so it was just he and I for the first 2 months. And then we started gradually getting some more staff. But we had a lot of time to sit there and think, okay, and he had some legacy information in terms of what it had been. And we said, okay, how can we make this relevant? Because for this university that has not had anything like this before, it is a military organization. There are a lot of civilians that make up the faculty and staff of Marine Corps University, but all of the schools and programs are led by Marine colonels. So, and you got to make yourself relevant for what it is. If you want to be part of what they're doing, they have to see the worth in both camps. And so we sat around for a long time, spitballing. Okay, how do we do that? And being a Marine really helped me in that. I even happen to know some of the directors, so that always is helpful. But having different voices at the table, and that's where those academic non-resident or Donald Bren chairs came in, that funded by the Marine Corps University Foundation, and they were so helpful. And previously, they had been in different offices scattered around the university, and they all came together, and they hadn't really worked together in one organization before, but they said, okay, this is something new. The university wants us to help with this, and they were really instrumental in getting us off the ground. And the closest thing I could come up with was that we were going to be a think tank for the university, but a think tank and a do tank. And come to find, I thought I had coined that phrase, but I guess I haven't. Someone else has used it before. But I really wanted us to be more than just a group of folks sitting around a table talking about and discussing innovative ideas for national security and how it affects the Marine Corps. I wanted us to do things. And so we got some rudder steers from the university hierarchy, if you will, about, okay, these types of things would be useful. And so we started just launching these initiatives as we were literally piecing together an office that looked like our first operations officer called it a refugee camp. He said he walked in, he thought he was in a refugee camp because there was just stuff everywhere and holes in the wall, and so we were literally trying to get a physical space together, but then also have immediate impact for that academic year that was starting, and I started in July. Of course, the academic year was even underway already for one of the schools. So that was a very important lesson to me. I carried some of my Marine Corps leadership thinking into this role, but I wasn't sure how it would play with academics, and it turns out very well. And basically my philosophy is equip and empower. You give people the training, the tools, resources they need, and then you empower them to go and do excellent things. And so I did that with the staff, regardless, military or civilian, or volunteers that came in, or people that wanted to be a part, or students that would bring their ideas to us, or faculty. same thing. So,
Can
okay,
you give an example?
sure. So very early on, the operations officer came to me and he said, and he was, his name is Major Tim Riemann. He is gone on. He's serving over in Bahrain right now. So he was only with us for a year. And he came to me with an idea. He said, ma'am, I read this book called Where Good Ideas Come From. And I have this idea for a command and staff college elective that I would like to lead. He goes, I have no academic credentials beyond he didn't even have a master's degree at that point. So he went on to go to the School of Advanced Warfighting. But he's like, I'm going to be leading my peers through this discussion. And this basic premise of this book is that when you have a common theme and you allow many voices around a common idea, you make new and novel connections that you wouldn't ordinarily have. When you have, for example, in this particular setting, an elective class at Command and Staff College, everyone might read the same article or the same book and then have a discussion about that article or book and pull out the salient points. Well, Where Good Ideas Come From basically had a theme for every class period. And the students were required to read a book of their own choosing, say around a favorite in the military, leadership. Read a book on leadership that you like or that you've been, the rule was you couldn't have read it already. It had to be new. It had to be 200 pages or more. But then come to class prepared to give a 5 to 10 minute discussion on leadership. But everybody in that 10 to 12 person class has read a different book on leadership. And so what you start to see are these common themes about leadership itself based from all of these different examples. You might have military leaders in there. You might have industry leaders in there. You might have nonprofit people or those that were for social justice, whatever. But it starts to stimulate this much deeper, richer conversation around a common topic. So this was his idea. And I mean, the elective season, you had to have all your academic things in your course card and all that, which I hadn't done before, he hadn't done before. And I said, yeah, Tim, go for it. And he did. And that class, the elective period is only a month long, essentially, month of January. And they continued to meet until they graduated in June, because those students enjoyed it so much that they loved to get together and talk about these topics of the day or whatever was on someone's mind for hours, literally.
The Krulak Center encouraged, embraced, gave a sort of a petri dish concept to grow.
Right.
And it sounds to me like that in that particular example, it fostered such creativity so I can't even imagine that the Marine Corps, I've never even heard of such a thing, where now how is he connected to the Krulak Center, this gentleman?
He was my operations officer. So yeah, so he knew he was coming to the Krulak Center, and he had been the aide de camp for Marine Corps Combat Development Command, Lieutenant General Walsh at that time. And so he had done a staff job, had been in, I guess, Command and Staff College before that. So yeah, he did have a master's degree. But anyway, but he was coming, he's like, okay, well, how do I personally be of value to the Krulak Center as we start to get up and running and be of value to the university, to gain buy-in and to get people to participate in what we were doing, what we knew would be of benefit to the students. But if you can't get to the students because the faculty are resistant or the leadership doesn't like what you're doing, then what you're doing is of no use. So we knew we had to make ourselves as relevant as possible, as quickly as possible. And this elective was a great first step. And so, yeah, it really proved, I think, to a lot of folks in the university that there is room to do things a little bit differently. And when students have a voice in adult students especially have a voice in their own education, you get some incredible byproduct out of that. And that's the feedback we got from the students, or like, hey, every elective at Command and Staff College should be taught this way, or this is the most amazing class I've ever taken. And some very educated people coming through there. So that was a great validation for us. So Another great example was our graphic novel, Destination Unknown, that you may be aware of.
That I think did get.
Yes, it's gotten a lot of press, but that was an idea by a couple of students in this group called Ender's Galley. They had gone off and graduated Command Staff College, but were still wanted to be involved with the Krulak Center because these were sort of these, perpetual deep thinkers and just classic innovators for the Corps. And they called me, they were on this road trip somewhere and the connection was really bad. And they said, "Man, we have this idea. We want to do a graphic novel." And my first thought was, come on, I have kids that are late teens, early 20s at this point, and I was familiar with graphic novels in that sense. And I'm thinking, how can this be of use? And this was sort of my own internal dialogue as they were sort of pitching their idea. Very quickly, I realized, okay, well, the demographic of the Marine Corps, the majority is 25 years and younger, that this is something that's going to appeal to them more so than if I give you this, hey, read this book on this battle. A lot of them are going to be like, oh, you stabbed me through the heart. I want to be part of the conversation, but I can't. I don't know. It's a brand new way to get people talking about important topics. And so in this case, it was future war. The year was 2075 and Space Marines. And this was even before like Space Force stood up and all that.
Wow.
So that was an idea that we are a supporter for them and for that group. And we have our team, different members of our team writing for them and then facilitating training, bringing the artists together, we brought in August Cole and Mark Sable to give classes. And yeah, it's been a fantastic project. They're on now version 3. Of course, version 1 won all kinds of awards. So there's just a couple of examples of what we can do and what we like to do, quite honestly, because really nobody else has the time. And that's the gift that we have. We have the time and the flexibility because we're not set by a certain curriculum and moving students through in a certain constrained time period like the schools are. We have the ability to do that. So we like to do that for everybody.
Okay, so keep with other.
So one of our greatest strengths is our network. And so our primary focus is and always will be the students involved in professional military education. So resident at Marine Corps University and then scattered literally throughout the world. I think the number is like 90,000 Marines are involved in PME somewhere. So we want to focus on them, reach them, affect them with our programming, with our staff, with our essay contests, get them talking in our professional dialogue on the landing, which is our PME portal, that sort of thing. But then we created this non-resident fellows program this past spring, where we're reaching out to sort of the community at large to fill gaps in the university staff where we don't have expertise. And a lot of that was STEM focused. We're very much a liberal arts college where you have history, international relations, political science types that are make up the majority of the faculty and staff. And we knew when we had students come through that wanted to talk about space or wanted to talk about additive manufacturing, that when we needed to get them mentorship on and I say we in the sense of the university, mentorship on their papers, that we had to go out and look for that expertise. And so we assembled this group of non-resident fellows. We have 27 of them that cover down on all those areas and more. And
wow.
So we have that network, and they're scattered around the world. And they're American, they're British, they're New Zealand, academic. There's some are Marines, some are joint service. So we have a smattering represented there, but they're a group that we leverage for the students. We have them on our broadcast, which was another initiative of COVID, because we couldn't have a traditional lecture series. And so we have a virtual lecture series, but getting them through and recording those and then blasting them out to our community of interest. Hey, if you want to hear about the latest in wargaming, we've got 2 experts or 3 on a panel talking about sort of the future of wargaming, whatever it may be. So we have their networks, and then our Donald Bren chairs that, again, funded by the University Foundation that are part of the Krulak Center. They spend a great deal of time in their professional networks and publishing and speaking and writing and everything on their specific area of expertise and spinning in their network. And then they bring that back into the university, the Krulak Center, to do lecture series or to collaborate on writings and that sort of thing. Everyone mentors students as well. So I like to say we operate on two axes. We have our horizontal in and through the schools and programs at Marine Corps University, and then our vertical axis, which is our higher headquarters, Quantico, National Capital Region, but partners, allies, other academics, our federally funded research labs that are out there. We have a great connection now with MIT's Lincoln Labs, and they're hosting for the first time an elective in Command Staff College because of the collaboration with us and our non-resident fellow that we have. So it's just really exciting. So we're much broader than just the 13, 14 of us in the Krulak Center assigned by table of organization, if you will.
This non-resident fellows STEM intelligence world seems to me that perhaps could explode in all the most wonderful ways for the Marine Corps community and the DoD in general, because I've often wondered about the connection between all of the creative things happening in universities around the world, around the country, around the world, with respect to STEM. My son is a computer scientist, and sort of disconnected from the Marine. I've not met anybody in the Marine Corps, or not many people in the Marine Corps, who are thrilled about computer science. And it's kind of important. So I just, in an environment like the Krulak Center, where there can be just such an exploration of ideas, and as you say, not narrowed by the deadlines of coursework for a specific, not narrow in a bad way, but narrow academic goals, could be, and I would think that the universities involved, or the fellows involved, their perspective and the universities from which they come or support them or for whom they're involved, would be thrilled about this opportunity. I've caught a couple of the broadcasts. I think that they're wonderful. They're on YouTube. I'm a subscriber. And no, it's very informal and laid back, but very interesting and deep. I would think that this would be unusual and wonderful. Is the Marine Corps embracing this, or how is it being received?
Well, I think at the university they're grateful that they have this pot that they can reach into, and that we can deliver. If somebody needs experts, and I'm going to come back to wargaming because that's been a big focus this year with our Commandant's planning guidance.
Yes.
And that we specifically sought out some experts in wargaming, and some of them have come in person even that are local to help some of the schools with some of their wargaming efforts. Others have participated virtually and are already of great help. But in terms of STEM in the Marine Corps, traditionally for commissioning programs, the Marine Corps, if you go through the academy or NROTC, which is what I did, you just had to have a degree. It could be in underwater basket weaving. Many Marines are liberal arts, like history, English, poli-sci, something like that. More so, though, especially coming out of the academy, you'll have some more technically oriented officers. A lot of them vectored over to Naval Postgraduate School. And so and I can facilitate an introduction over there to Colonel Randy Pugh, who's a senior Marine, who probably would have a much better perspective on how the Corps is embracing these technical specialties and degrees that these Marines are coming out of that school with. So they're over there getting very technical degrees and then being put back into the Marine Corps ecosystem to focus in these very important areas. I have one of them at the Krulak Center, Captain Ben Herbold, who graduated from Naval Postgraduate School last spring, and he's my technical information operations officer at the Krulak Center. And he's already been involved greatly in the School of Advanced Warfighting's planning efforts for their war games, talking about adversary capabilities, and even in allied capabilities. And I can't talk about it too much because A, I don't know it, and B, a lot of it's classified, but to talk about how we use technology to affect our planning in sort of that non-specific realm of information operations, and how we just proceed there. That a lot of folks we just don't have the exposure to it, so we don't know what our capabilities are in the technology realm. But there's been a lot of really good work, and a lot of it by Marines that we just don't have the visibility. And so they only show up when we need them, or they're locked away behind a secure facility that we see the product of their work, but we don't necessarily see them. So this is an area where the Corps is expanding. I know the Corps is expanding, but it's not been a traditional strength of ours.
I don't tell me, I might want to interview him for my podcast.
Oh, sure. Well, I'm sure he would love it. Yeah, and I think Randy Pugh over at MPS would be wonderful as well, because he is very well connected into that community out there at Naval Postgraduate School, and what they do for the Navy and the Marine Corps, and how Marine Corps students are used. So he's another good one.
Thank you.
Yes.
So, are there more?
People probably don't know about the Krulak Center, and I've just touched on it a little bit, is that we're not just a purely military team, we're not a purely academic team, is that we're this diverse team. So diverse team, not always physically, and I say we've changed each year, but in terms of getting minority representation and things like that, we're some years are better than others with that, just because we have the flow of people getting orders and having to move on out of the university and out of the Krulak Center, but of diversity of thought, which I think is so important when we're looking at these really complex problems. And so we have literally someone in their 20s and someone in their 70s and everyone in between, thinking about these common problems that we face. And it's really amazing to see when we all focus on, because many times we're all off working on our own initiative, but when we come together and focus on a common issue, what we can come up with because of that extraordinarily deep and diverse background. Some have military service, some do not. Some are veterans of Vietnam or the early 70s or whatever, just purely academic. Some are hybrid. And then you have the Marines themselves that come from different specialty communities. We have ground people, we have aviators, we have support folks like myself. And so it's really quite something just to be able to come together. And it takes, as the director, a lot of trust in my subordinates, if you will, if I can use that term, but the people that work for me, to allow them this space to run with an idea that they might have, or the patience, more often than not, to allow them to try and fail, and then finally get on something that sticks. But then also just the vulnerability to try these new things in a place that encourages creative thought, but it doesn't always receive creative thought well, and that is the Marine Corps or the military. I mean, for a lot of good reasons, because we have very high stakes to pay if we fail.
Of course.
And so it's not in our culture to want to have people experiment and fail. Failure is not well received. But in this space where we are, in an academic setting, is a great space to do that. And so to allow some initiatives that we might have to go forward, even though I'm completely unsure about how it will go, that has been an exercise in trust for me. And also, I'll come back to the vulnerability word, because I'm very aware of the name that our center bears and that General Krulak is obviously alive and well and still involved in what we're doing, and the university. And I don't want to bring any sort of discredit to the organization, and so I don't want to do anything that might do that. But I'm reminded one of his first visits to the Krulak Center, General Krulak said, in fact, he was giving an interview to the Marine Corps Times in my office, and I was just sitting there quietly at my desk taking notes. He said, in order for innovation to happen, he said, you have to be willing to look foolish to the crowd. You have to be willing to do that. And for Marines, we don't want that. People expect us to be a certain way, to act a certain way, to look a certain way, and to have professional competency undergirding all of that. And so that's hard. That's hard for us. And it's hard for academics too, who their professional reputation is everything to them. And so they don't necessarily want their name associated with something that might not take off or might not be perceived well necessarily. So it's been an interesting line to tread for me.
When I hear you talk this way, I think of, and I think of this very often. I think of, there was actually a book about all of the great people who failed. And Walt Disney apparently filed bankruptcy 7 times before his studio got off the ground. And I think about that kind of thing, the humiliation of that, the shame of that, the frustration, knowing that he had something brilliant, and how many times he just wanted perhaps to give up. But here we are 100 years later, and it's how many billion-dollar organization that continues to grow and weather even pandemics and have content that is appealing across a broad swath of world populations. And so when you talked about diversity, I really have to say that I thought about how there are problems that are timeless to the Marine Corps. Like when this past year they retired tanks in the Marine Corps arsenal of weapons and vehicles. And there were people who mourned this because tanks had been, but warfare has changed so much. And resources really do need to be used in the most efficient, effective way possible.
Yes.
But I thought about what kind of innovative thinking and research came to that decision? What kind of thinking came to that huge choice for the Marine Corps? I mean, it's iconic to think about tanks, and so the visual of it, the history of it. So I wondered if circumstances like that are born of these kinds of innovation. Now, of course, I'm not asking, did the Krulak Center have anything to do with tanks being retired? But I am saying that these small little circumstances, like John Krulak was talking about in your office that day, of failures leading to the nugget of something that could really be valuable, can grow to be something that could be a hard choice, but very effective and efficient for the future of the Marine Corps. That's what I was thinking when you were talking about that.
Yeah, and that's what we're really trying to get after. And one of my frustrations early on when I was, of course, I'm a product of Marine Corps professional military education, but went to the Army War College as a one-off, if you will, but I had been through professional military education, and I understood at the time why I was learning certain things. As a major, you're trying to learn the Marine Corps planning process so that you can be a member of a operational planning team when you go back to your unit. So there are certain key student learning outcomes and objectives that you need to have for each level. But what I experienced and what I saw was that it was really very deeply ingrained in history, which the Marine Corps is very passionate about our history. And we understand the value of studying history and how you can take lessons from the past and apply them to the future. But what frustrated me when I was getting a glimpse at everyone's sort of curriculum and what they were studying was to the degree and the depth to which we were still continuing to do that. and not acknowledging, in my view, the way the world had changed and how warfare had changed. And I knew from talking to students and from others that had been through PME recently that they were frustrated, that there wasn't more instruction on technical information operations. Like give me some practical skills to go back to the Fleet Marine Forces with. I need to know how space figures into my battle plan, because if I'm in a GPS denied environment, I need to know what I can rely on for backup, if anything. I need to know that as a planner. And we just didn't have that, as part of the regular curriculum. I've since learned that there are, many different reasons why the curriculum looks the way it does. Some of it is completely out of the hands of the directors that put these things together. But there are a lot of competing priorities. And so what we've tried to do at the Krulak Center is try to address those gaps to the best degree that we can. So when students have the time and space, they can participate. They can go back and, look at the broadcast that we've done on cyber conflict. They can go back and, do a deeper dive on the wargaming expertise from sort of around the world to see how they might be able to bring that into their own units. And so this idea that the world has changed and warfare has changed is absolutely a topic of discussion in every school and program that we have. There's just simply not enough time to address, everything. So, but we have to know. Mark Twain said, history doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes. So we do have to understand history in order to put the present and the future in proper perspective. So we're getting there.
I love that. I love it.
I guess, and I don't know how many I've said, I've lost track, but I mean, I think more than anything, what I would want people to know is that at the Krulak Center, we just, more than the four walls, we have this commitment to an innovation mindset and what that means. And I think that is the goal of professional military education anyway, is teaching people how to think. Not what to think, but how to think, and what you have to do in order to make yourself a more agile thinker in whatever situation you find yourself in. And so the schools have their ideas of how they do that and what the students actually need to know when they graduate and everything. And again, we're trying to fill in the gaps, but this mindset, and we're turning against the bureaucracy mindset. All the things that make a bureaucracy great in terms of stability, reliability, structure, things that reduce risk that we like in the military, can also be, of course, impediments to adaptability and agility and innovation. And so we're constantly having to check ourselves that we're not sort of falling prey to that, but we are delivering relevant programming to the community at large. And so we're very firmly committed to that. And each and every team member is. And it's amazing because it's not something that I've had to sit down with everyone and say, now look, since you're a member of the Krulak Center, you have to believe these things. It's innate in everybody. And I think the Krulak Center allows them to let those characteristics and questions come to the fore. Because in a military context, that's not always appreciated. Here's the plan, here are the orders, here's the standard operating procedure to do X. If you follow this, you'll be fine. You won't get in trouble, and this is the way that things normally unfold in the military. But what the battlefield, certainly yesterday, but more so now and in the future, is going to need is people, again, that understand sort of, hey, doctrine or standard operating procedures or orders are certainly the starting point. But when things change, and they will, I have to be able to think my way out of that. And I have to have, empowered my subordinates to do the very same thing. So how do I do that? How do I train for that? And so that's really what we're trying to get after at the Krulak Center. And the devotion to that mindset keeps new ideas coming, and keeps that ground just really, really fertile.
I love that description because it really does explain in general terms for anyone, whether that's a junior enlisted Marine or a senior Marine officer, what the end game is here. The end game, it sounds to me, you're describing, really is to help Marines really be more agile, just from a mental state, just from an intellectual state, if you will. I think actually Marines are very good at that. I think the one thing that I have tried to, throughout my career of writing about Marines, 20 years, 2 years now, is when I started writing about Marines in the 1990s, I fear that Marines had a very bad reputation. The age of the internet, I think, has improved the impression of Marines in the world because it has shown the diversity in the Marine Corps and Marines in general. I love the internet for that. But one thing that I have known in my life from my own professional and personal experiences and have wanted to show is that Marines are a very intelligent bunch of people, generally speaking, and they're quick thinkers, quick problem solvers.
Yes.
And they're never given credit for it. It really, I mean, when anyone reads Medal of Honor citations, almost any Navy Cross Medal of Honor citation will include quick thinking. And I love that. So any way that the Marine Corps here through the Krulak Center can encourage, embrace, foster, elicit that, I love it.
Yeah, and we thank you, and we are all about that, obviously, but we want to ensure, because when you reference the quick thinking, it's absolutely true, and that is that we call it that bias to action. We want to ensure that well, sometimes actually quick thinking is not the best thinking. So sometimes you have to sit for a minute and think deeply about something. If you have the time, If you have the time, then you really do need to sit and think deeply and pull in other people and experts and other sources. And so we want to ensure by doing that sort of repetitively and building that practice is that when you do have to make that split second decision, that snap decision, that quick thinking is good thinking.
It's muscle memory for thinking, essentially.
Yes, you have developed your brain and your experience and your cognitive abilities in such a way that first thought is the best thought, not just one that comes to you and you react. So that just like building your muscles, that takes practice, that takes dedication, that takes discipline to do that, which are all words that we love in the Marine Corps, but we have to make sure that's broad and deep and different probably than what we're used to and what we're used to studying. And again, I think that's what we're dedicated to doing at the Krulak Center, is creating those new experiences.
I love it. I love it. Valerie, it's been such a pleasure and an honor to have you here today. And again, it's an honor to have you. And I'm thrilled that you're our first podcast of 2021. And again, so grateful. And how can my audience reach out to the Krulak Center? And how frequent will the open houses be, hopefully, in the new year?
So we're on social media at the Krulak Center for Twitter. You mentioned our YouTube page. We have an organizational mailbox, the Krulak Center. But I can get that to you. I can get those notes to you. But I mean, if you Google us, yeah, fantastic. And we're on our innovation PME portal. I'll get you that as well. Our open houses, we hope to do them monthly, and we're going to do one in December, but with the rising COVID numbers, and we're really sort of in a minimal manning posture again right now as we get through the holidays and early parts of winter. And so the goal is monthly, but at this point, I'm not sure exactly when the next one will be. But you can still, again, people can follow us on social media. We're going to resume our broadcasts every Thursday at 2 p.m. You can join live, or you can listen to the recording after the fact. But we love the live audiences because that's where we really get some good Q&A with our presenters. So that's probably the fastest and easiest way at this point, starting off the new year. But thank you, Meriwether. I really enjoyed it, and I'm honored again to be the first to come on in 2021. Hopefully, the start of a wonderful, wonderful new year.
Thank you. All right, Valerie. Have a great day and Happy New Year.
Yes, Happy New Year to you too, Meriwether. Take care.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Pretty intriguing, right? Especially for the academics and Core Stories audience, but really for any Marine who has an interest in different ways of approaching problems in the Marine Corps future. And I am astounded at the creative and just really true innovation. The Krulak Center really is sort of a birthplace of innovation in the truest sense of the term, and the scientific term, if you will, but also the business term. So I learned so much in this podcast, and I hope that you will engage the Krulak Center. I hope that you will check out some of the broadcasts, but also just kind of keep your ear to the ground about what's going on there. Anyway, thank you, and we'll catch you the next time. Semper Fidelis.
Core Stories, Ordinary Marines, Extraordinary Lives.